So we improved the optimistic updating behavior. Now, if we had an error, as we had before, if I briefly bring back that error and I restart that backend, if we had that, then of course, as you saw before, adding places would fail. And if I tried to add a place like the African savanna, it would show up here briefly, but then it would be removed. Now, of course, that's a better experience than having this incorrect UI, which we had before, but it's not the best possible experience. Instead, it would be nice to also show the user some error message if something goes wrong here. But at the moment, I do indeed throw an error observable that contains an error with an error message, but it's important to keep in mind that add place to user places is called from inside the available places component here. And I don't actually want to show the error message here. We could do that, but I don't want to do it here in this application. That's why I'm currently not handling that error case here, even though we could. And therefore, at the moment, we're not seeing any error message anywhere. Now again, as always, there are different ways of improving this situation and of handling this situation. But here, I'll go for an approach where I'll use an extra component and service for managing this. And that's why attached you find a shared zip file, which you should download and extract. And then you should add this shared folder into your app folder next to places. And this shared folder then contains a modal component and an error modal component, which uses the modal component in the end. And both components then use some features you saw before in this course already. For receiving a title and message that can be output here in the error modal, and for selecting the dialog element that can be found here in the modal component to show this modal dialog. By the way, the dialog element is a standard browser element, and it does have a show modal method on its DOM object, which I'm calling here. And this will then simply open this dialog. So I'm using some built-in browser features here. And then there also is an error service in this shared folder. And in there I have some signal, which I expose as a read-only signal. And I have a method for setting it to an error message and for clearing it. So to setting it back to an empty string. And the idea now is that we could try using this error service for telling the application that this error modal should be shown. And how could we do that? Well, for a start, we should go to the place where the error might occur. So in the places service. Here in add place to user in catch error. Here I want to use this error service to inform it that an error occurred, so that then in a second step, any interested parties can react to that error and, for example, show that error modal. So therefore, here in the places service, we can and should inject the error service like this. Make sure to also import the error service, of course. And with it injected, we can use it here in catch error and call show error. And here I'll then simply output that same error message. Now we just need to listen to this signal here somewhere. We need to react to changes in it. And a good place could be the app component, the root component of our application. There we can also inject the error service by calling inject, like this. And of course, you must make sure, as always, that all the things are imported into this file. And then we can add a signal here which simply exposes the error signal provided by the error service. And now in the app component template, at the very top of it maybe, we can render the modal, the error modal, which is part of that shared folder that was attached, conditionally. We can check if the error signal has a truthy value. And if it does, we can render app error modal and make sure that this is added to the imports array of the app component here, and that it's imported into the file as well. And then to app error modal pass a title, which can be a hard-coded string and therefore doesn't need any property binding or something like this, like an error occurred. And the message is then a bound property because I want to bind it to the value that's stored in the error signal. And with that, this modal should be shown conditionally if an error occurs, with help of that error service and that modal. So now if you reload, and I still have that error in my backend code, so I'm still returning that error response no matter what happens. And therefore, if I now click on one of these elements, you see that modal opens up. And if I click OK, it goes away. And that's one way how you could handle an error that occurs due to some request that's sent from a different component than where you want to handle it. As always, and as mentioned, it's not the only way of handling this, but it's one way. And with that, I'll get rid of that error code in the backend and restart that server and move on so that we can finally finish this demo application.